Good morning, friends. Brian King here. I was watching a Facebook Live from one of my Facebook friends, and she was talking about the fears of public speaking. And there's always one event that pops into my head. And I'll share that in a little bit whenever anybody brings up public speaking. But because that, and I don't know if she mentioned this in her video or if it just popped into my head, but the thought of how embarrassed some people get at the idea of public speaking because they're convinced something bad is going to go wrong, that's going to be so humiliating or so embarrassing that it's going to forever impact how people see them in a negative way. So they catastrophize it, they make it worst case scenario. So I went on my Facebook profile and I asked people to share their most embarrassing moment in exchange for this video that you're now watching, where I will share my most embarrassing moments. Because one thing that's really important for us to do for each other is to support each other in being more vulnerable and discussing those things that are kind of shadows in our story, the things we keep to ourselves about times where we judged ourselves or thought less of ourselves, and although we don't communicate them, they're still in there causing us problems. They're like little cancers that are eating away at our self-esteem and our confidence. And it isn't until we get rid of those things that we're able to be free to express that part of ourselves. So this little exercise and sharing your most embarrassing moment is hopefully a way for you to put it out there, get some distance from it and say, man, that was wild, man. I learned a lot from that. Man, at the moment I felt really embarrassed, but now that I have some distance from it, it was a wonderful moment that taught me some humility, reminded me that I'm human, and I feel better now that it's happened and I've processed it. That's my philosophy for how to approach those very human moments that we all have. And when you share it, you find that it was not as isolating an experience as you thought. Because in the moment you can think, man, I'm the only one this ever happened to. And that makes me a freak, an outlier, an outcast, because nobody else had to deal with this, just me. But then you put it out there, and you find that it is almost as common as breathing. There are so many people out there that have had that experience as well, which kind of, and I'm not a fan of this word, normalizes it. It makes it very common, routine, whatever you want to call it, to the point where it's not even worth giving your attention to anymore. Because why would you fixate on something that's so human and so common? It's much easier to let it go. So with that, I'm going to share two of my most embarrassing moments. The first one I want to share is when I was in junior high. That's old school language for middle school. If there's any millennials or anything watching this. But there was this event, I think it was after school, where there were some sporting competitions or whatever between students and teachers and so on. And I wanted to check it out. And back in that day, I was just as rambunctious with my ADHD and squirminess and have difficulty sitting still. And I sat on the bleachers, and I noticed that there were some kids underneath the bleachers that were kind of walking around and treating it like a jungle gym. And I thought, well, that looks like a lot of fun. I think I'm going to try and join them because I'm not into sports and I was kind of bored out of my mind. So in between the stairs, like let's say this is where a person's sitting and this is where their feet are. In between, there was this space that would give you access to everything that's underneath the bleachers. And I thought to myself, oh, I'm a skinny kid, I'll fit. So I started trying to squirm my way through that space, only to find that as soon as my hips cleared, I got stuck. So now I'm sitting here surrounded by strangers, squirming around trying to figure out how the heck am I either going to get down behind the bleachers or back up. And I found I couldn't get any leverage. I wasn't able to move one way or the other. I needed to ask for help. So I just started saying, could somebody please help me? I'm stuck. I can't move. I don't know what to do. And the adults around me, fortunately, who didn't really notice me because they were watching the sporting event, they quickly came to my aid. I remember one person took an arm and they kind of pulled me out of there. And I was so embarrassed. I felt like everybody was watching me. Everybody knew what happened and so on. So I just felt like the smallest, stupidest thing in the world because I tried that and became helpless and had to embarrassingly ask for help. That was what my junior high brain was telling me at the time. The reality is the people around me saw what happened. They didn't think it was a big deal. They helped me. I was fine. And they went back to what they were doing. You know, now in hindsight, I can look at that and say, well, that was me exercising some bad judgment at, age of 12 or so. And I know to never do that again. So it wasn't a completely wasted experience. It was just an indication of little kids, especially with ADHD, sometimes act impulsively and it bites them in the butt, and natural consequences rule the day. And come to think of it, as an adult, I still have experiences like that. Not on bleachers, but with natural consequences. So that's the first embarrassing thing. The second one is, ironically, all recorded on audio. Not a minute was missed. And I actually talked about this on another video. But a couple years ago, I was paid quite well to go to a different state and do a keynote presentation for an annual fundraiser. So in other words, this is where this nonprofit got the bulk of their operating funds for the year, was at this fundraiser. And I was the guy that was given the presentation to lift them up, make them feel generous, and support this organization. So I proceed to give my talk. I'm killing it. There are tears in the room. People are very, very engaged in what it is I'm telling them. And then at the end of it, I conclude my presentation. I shift my weight from my left leg to my right to step out of the way of the podium, because the person who hired me was going to step up and give an introduction to the next part of the event. But so as I shifted my weight, it turns out that during my presentation, my right leg had fallen completely asleep. So as soon as I shifted my weight, I dropped like a stone. And there was about 200 people in that room. And I fell and hit the ground hard. But here's the weird thing. I was wearing a digital recorder and a microphone that I clipped on my shirt in order to record the presentation, and it didn't come off. And it didn't turn off. So the fall, the people rushing around me, Brian, are you okay? Getting me back on my feet, all that is recorded. So while I'm on the ground thinking, what the heck just happened? It also occurred to me that I can't just let this lie. I just fell in front of 200 people and they're wondering what the heck happened. I gotta say something. So when I stood back up, I attributed the fall to my Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, my connective tissue disorder that impacts my joints and whatever, because I didn't know what else to attribute it to. This, totally surprised me as well. What turned out to be the case is several months later, I was in the ER and I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. So that's where I discovered what the actual issue was. But at the time, I thought it was the Ehlers-Danlos. So I explained to the audience, hey, I have this condition, and sometimes it makes my joints really weak, and they can't support me, and that's why I fell. And then, because I'm a big movie buff, where did I go to for my wisdom? I went to Batman, okay? And there was a scene we're talking Christian Bale's Batman, not Michael Keaton. But in the first Batman movie, he kept falling down this well where there were bats that would come and scare him or whatever. And in one situation, one of those events where he's flashing back, his dad helps pull him out and he's carrying him back to the house and he says, Bruce, why do we fall? And his response is, so we can learn to pick ourselves up. So what I said to the audience after that is, well, you know what? That was a surprise, and I had the Ehlers-Danlos, but you know what? This is a teachable moment for all of us. The importance of getting back up every time we fall. And that was just such a perfect way of putting it. A lot of people thought afterwards that the fall was planned. They thought it was part of my presentation. So I'm wondering how many of the people in attendance actually thought that. But the reality was, that could have been a humiliating moment for me, and it was surprising. There was a part of me that was really like, holy cow, did that just happen, and what do these people think? But a lot of them came up to me afterwards, and they were less concerned about the fall, and they had more to say about how I handled it. So it turned out to be actually a useful, a beneficial piece of that whole thing. Now, I know there are people that are terrified of public speaking because they're afraid that if I say the wrong thing, if I forget my lines, I'm going to look bad, people are going to talk about me. The best advice I can give you is prepare for those moments. Prepare for human moments to take place and prepare how you're going to recover, as opposed to fretting over what if it happens, what if it happens, what if it happens, oh my goodness, all life is going to end as we know it, and thinking no further than that moment of embarrassment. If you plan for the eventualities of flubbing your words or losing your place, find a way to turn that into a teachable moment for everyone, and then there's nothing to be embarrassed about. So I hope these shares were worthy of your shares, and please leave me some comments below. Let's continue the conversation about our embarrassing moments so we can get past them and be much more courageous and confident in how we approach life. If there's somebody else that you think can benefit from this, please share it. And until next time, this has been Brian. Thanks for being you.